Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, July 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 59 days, the game against Michigan in 150 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. You can book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. So on today's show, we're doing a little bit of audience service. This is a question that we got as part of our multiple listener question shows on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed. And this one was a long enough one that we thought, you know what, we're going to push that over to the morning show. We may drop it in the Buckeye Weekly feed as a bonus show as well. We'll see. But it was from @SHWilson24. And he says, let's pretend the last time I consumed any Buckeye news was the week after the Natty. What did I miss? Give me the bullet points. I'm a busy man. Someone else who is a busy man, that is Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I tried to put together a little bit of a timeline, and it's like, boy, a lot has happened since you and I walked out of Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta on the night of January 20th, or the early morning hours of the 21st. Let's start with the guys who left Ohio State and who subsequently found homes at other schools. There were guys who left after the fall and found homes earlier, so presumably you know about those. Here are the guys that we need to fill you in on who left after that. Devin Brown going to Cal. Calvin Simpson-Hunt going to Baylor. George Fitzpatrick going to Kansas State. Hero Canoe going to Texas. Aaron Noland going to South Carolina. And Sam Williams-Dixon leaving Ohio State to come back to Ohio State. I think maybe the most interesting one there is Hero Canoe, who, number one, plays a position Ohio State would really probably love to have another proven player at. And number two is going to play at a team that is coming to Columbus in week 1 of this season.
Yeah, and I think there are also rumors, or I don't even know if he said this, but if he had known Jim Knowles was leaving, that maybe he wouldn't have left Ohio State. And so that's going to be, like you said, it's going to be somebody they see again, and a position that they couldn't afford to lose, and was a bit of a surprise that they did lose it. But then you look at like a Devin Brown, who's got a really good opportunity at Cal, playing in the ACC, just like Kyle McCord did the year before, as we all know. But Cal's starting quarterback went to Indiana, so there's an opening there. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do over the course of a season. And frankly, like all of these guys that you mentioned, when I flip through like my Phil Steele magazine, it's like you're like, where's that Ohio State player projected? Where is that former Buckeye projected? And as he generally does, he projects all of them to start because they came from Ohio State, like Calvin Simpson-Hunt going to Baylor, where he had some good moments at Ohio State in camps, but then Aaron Scott passed him by last year. Now is basically the end of it for him. So it's the interesting, the opportunities, the renewed opportunities for these guys is going to be fun to watch.
For sure, yeah. And you gave a little bit of a spoiler there because we have not gotten to the Jim Knowles news yet. First, we got to talk about the championship celebration that happened inside Ohio Stadium the Saturday afternoon after the national championship game. Good times, great vibes. Everyone was kind of looking around and going, all right, well, who is it here? That's interesting. And one of the people that wasn't there was Jim Knowles. And boy, has there been some back and forth on why that did or didn't happen since then. But not long, we covered that. We recorded our shows. We walked out of the stadium, and by the time we got home, the news was officially breaking. Yeah, turns out Ohio State defensive coordinator Jim Knowles was not at the Ohio Stadium event, but he is on his way to State College to be the new defensive coordinator for James Franklin in Penn State.
And really, the aftermath of this, where we had some articles, some interviews with him in the past couple of months, where he's the first coach I've ever heard mention, I did this for the money. It was about the money. Everybody else will tell you it's not about the money. This was famously about the money, and yet somehow maybe if he would have been invited to the celebration event, maybe he would have stayed. I doubt it. But a lot of drama there, but ended up doing what he's from Pennsylvania, so go ahead and fault him for going back to his home state. Although maybe a more realistic homecoming would have been going to Temple. Could you fault him if he goes to Temple, a Philly guy, or St. Joseph's or whatever, Drexel maybe, I don't know, but it's an interesting situation. It's rare where you lose a guy to a lateral move, in conference. I don't know how often that happens at Ohio State. We kind of saw it with like Al Washington going, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, that sort of thing. But rarely does Ohio State lose guys laterally, and they've done it with Tony Alford, and they seem to have picked up. That happened way before this timeline. I'm just trying to keep everything straight. But it's gonna be interesting to watch to see what Penn State does, because their defenses have been really, really good. Certainly better, I would say, than Ohio State's defense when Jim Knowles took over.
Yeah, for sure. You figure that the Penn State defense should be a little better this year, but that was not really the side of the ball where you had major questions for them last year. So we will see how that all goes. And boy, there's going to be some interesting storylines the week of that Ohio State Penn State game this year. So he was not the only coach to leave the Ohio State coaching staff. That was the only one that went for something of a lateral move. The other two, Justin Frye and Chip Kelly, they both headed off to the NFL. Chip Kelly, the new offensive coordinator for the Raiders. Justin Frye, the new offensive line coach with the Arizona Cardinals. And he will have some familiar faces joining him in about 2 months in reality, and in about 8 or 10 minutes or so on this show. We'll get to them a little later. But then that brings in the new coaches. Tyler Bowen, the new offensive line coach at Ohio State. Brian Hartline adds the offensive coordinator title. Matt Patricia going to taking over as the defensive coordinator. And then Billy Fessler taking over as the quarterback coach, because I added a spot because Brian Hartline kind of took over Chip Kelly's role. So I think, to me, certainly the one of these that inspired the most conversation at the time was Matt Patricia. And I think there was a lot of consternation and a lot of maybe concern over Matt Patricia. And boy, how is this guy going to fit in the college realm? So far, man, I don't have any big concerns. And there's a lot of schematic stuff that we haven't seen yet. But with as many questions as there were about how is this guy going to recruit, he hasn't had any exposure to college in 20 years. It seems like it's so far so good with him.
Yep, and then ask again after the Texas game, or actually ask again after the first quarter of the Texas game to find out whether he should keep his job or lose it. And you mentioned a bunch of names there, and like Billy Fessler was going to be a quarterback's coach in 2024 at UCLA. He's relatively unproven. Everybody talks highly about him. Brian Hartline never called plays before. That's another aspect here where we're going to find out how good he is at that. Matt Patricia, as you said, was it all Bill Belichick? He's been having the time of his life at Ohio State from watching him and seeing the way he interacts with players and recruits. And then Tyler Bowen hasn't coached the offensive line since like 2017. So you threw a bunch of names out there, and it's like there is reason for maybe an eyebrow raise or some concern for each one of those guys. And yet, so far, with no games being played, the reviews have been pretty good. But and it's not just Tyler Bowen on the offensive line. They brought in 2 other established veteran offensive line coaches to help him out. And so he's got an entire staff under him. So it's not just throwing him out to the wolves like that. Ryan Day's trying to give him some help and bolster an offensive line. But a lot of guys, a lot of names, new names, as you said. And I think there's reason to be concerned about each of those guys, but also reason to be confident about each of those guys. Billy Fessler, Ryan Day trusts him. That's enough for me. I'm okay with that. And Brian Hartline has been around Ryan Day and Chip Kelly as play callers. That's, if you're going to learn under anybody, do that, and then see how good that will inform how you call plays. And Matt Patricia's won Super Bowls. He's been around. And Tyler Bowen, the reviews have been fantastic with him, and he seems to be having the time of his life as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Matt Patricia winning Super Bowls. He won those Super Bowls with Bill Belichick, and if you've been in a coma since the end of that national championship game, just go Google Bill Belichick's name, and there will be some stories about that as well, and how things are going at North Carolina. You'll probably want to get caught up on that whole storyline as well. We're going to move on to spring football. We'll get to the questions coming out of the spring game later, but in the spring football, let's talk about just some of the new guys, some of the true freshmen, and some of the transfers who were maybe the most impressive. The 3 true freshmen who I have written down: are running back Bo Jackson, wide receiver Quincy Porter, cornerback Devin Sanchez. There were other guys who flashed certainly as well. Those were the three true freshmen who jumped out to me. There were also some transfers who you certainly saw and thought, okay, yeah, there's going to be some impressive production there. So who were maybe some other guys that jumped out to you this spring?
I would agree with those three freshmen that you named. I know Logan George, the defensive end from Idaho State, had some good moments and had a good spring game. Although, again, if the quarterbacks aren't live, most defensive ends are going to have a good game. Ethan Onianwa at left tackle seems to have solidified himself and won that job, which they desperately needed. And then overall, like the rest of the offensive line, I think they're deep enough, and they have some versatility. They have a ton of versatility, I believe, and so they'll be able to make the rest of that work. But getting Ethan Onianwa to win that job, and it's not like it's not been given to him. It's not been declared that he's won it. Like nobody has been named a starter yet on the offensive line, but it sure seems like he's going to be the guy there. So I think that is key. And of course, Max Clare at tight end coming in from Purdue is going to have some big moments this season because of the amount of attention that is going to be focused on everybody else. And we saw that, I think, in the spring game where he had a touchdown right down the seam when the defense is more focused on the Ohio State receivers, justifiably. But you can't forget about that guy.
No, for sure. That is going to be someone that you're going to be hearing a lot more from this fall. And yeah, those would be the guys, the transfers that I think are kind of the biggest names to know in addition to those three true freshmen that we mentioned. So now heading out of the spring game, we have now teleported forward to mid-April, and you talked a decent amount about the offensive line. My sense is the offensive line is they haven't announced, this is the guy who's going to be starting at this position. My sense is they feel reasonably good about the offensive line, and I think we have a pretty good sense for where guys will end up. The the bigger questions kind of remaining are, number one, the quarterback position, which is still sort of an open question coming out of the spring. And number two, the defensive line, and especially the depth and the interior of that defensive line. Those feel like if you're kind of going to say, what are the two or three biggest questions on this team? It's probably those two things and, where exactly people fit on the offensive.
Yeah, for me, the biggest concern is the defensive line. That's what we talked about coming out of spring. And nothing has changed. Spoilers, we'll talk about the rest of the timeline from April 15th to now, but nothing has changed much. And I know I'm getting a little ahead, but if they hadn't gone into the portal for some defensive end help, where would they be in terms of who is behind Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry? Are you relying on freshmen along with CJ Hicks, of course? But how deep are they without going and getting help? So I think overall, the defensive line, whether it's interior or exterior, is the big concern. And really, I think they're fine everywhere else defensively. I think we're both very high on the corners, pretty high on the safeties. You got Caleb Downs there. The linebackers should be among the best in the nation, but it all starts up front, and that's a lot of pressure on those guys.
Yeah, for sure. That is sort of the great unanswered question right now for Ohio State, and there's plenty of consternation about that in recruiting as well. We will get there. But post-spring, let's take a look at the Buckeyes. They did not lose anyone to the transfer portal in that spring portal window, which is somewhat remarkable given the amount of talent on that roster. But then in terms of the guys they brought in 4 guys after that spring window. The one who's probably the biggest name and the most likely to have an impact on this year's team, or a significant impact on this year's team, Bo Atkinson, an edge rusher out of North Carolina, Justin Terry, an offensive lineman for West Virginia, Jackson Corville, he was a kicker from Ball State, and then Eli Brickhandler, a quarterback from Houston Christian. To me, Atkinson is by a wide margin the one who is most likely to make a significant impact on the 2025 Ohio State football.
I would agree with that. I think Corville will raise the floor and force. They have more options, and it still may be Jaden Fielding, but they've got some options there. But Bo Atkinson coming in as a fourth-year junior who led North Carolina in tackles for loss and sacks last year. The problem is half of his sacks and tackles for loss came in a 2-game stretch in the middle of the season. So how consistent can he be? What can he do at Ohio State? He's a big kid. He's 6'5", 260, and can get after the passer, but can also just be a run-stopping, strong-side defensive end for you. So I think he's got some potential. So he's going to have to do something for Ohio State. And he was the top guy in the post-spring portal window, and they were able to go get him. And you wonder how badly they felt they needed him, or was this just an opportunity like, hey, there's interest here. What are we waiting for?
Yeah, he feels like someone who is going to play enough of a role this year that it probably was a little bit more of a need than a want, but certainly nice to have either way. So that's the post-spring portal additions. Now on to the guys who left after the year for the NFL draft. That spring game, all those guys came back and got their championship rings at halftime of that spring game. That was the kind of cool to see all those guys back in Columbus again. 14 of them ended up getting picked in the NFL draft, one short of the NFL draft record for a single school. 4 guys went in the first round: Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Jackson, Tyleik Williams, and Josh Simmons, all first-round picks. The rest of the guys, in order: Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, JT Tuimoloau, Cody Simon, Lathan Ransom, Jack Sawyer, Ty Hamilton, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke, Will Howard. Several of those guys going to spots where they're going to have former Ohio State teammates then playing with them. Josh Fryer, for example, is also he was a free agent signing with the Arizona Cardinals, where he and Donovan Jackson, someone else, one of the offensive linemen went to Arizona, and then Marvin Harrison's there, and Paris Johnson's there, and it was and so that'll be a little bit of old home week. Is there anyone who you look at from that Ohio State draft class and think that guy is in an incredible place, like exactly the perfect place to have an incredible NFL career?
I don't know about incredible. I think under the radar, Will Howard's in a good spot, being at Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers, who has like 1 year left basically. And then you can see Will Howard battling, but they're probably going to go ahead and draft a quarterback anyway. Travion Henderson being able to I think he's going to get a lot of action this year, and you drafted a guy in the second round to use him, and he's going to be fun to watch, I think. But overall, Donovan Jackson's versatility is going to be, we talk about it, but I think his strength is going to have to be at guard, and that's what that's what he's being drafted to do. So that's what he needs to be. And it was great what he was able to do at Ohio State, and he'll forever be remembered for that. But in the NFL, he better be a really darn good guard, because that's what he's being drafted to do.
So, yeah, I think Donovan Jackson is one of those guys where I would not bet against him at any point after watching what he did, getting thrown into a really kind of unfair position and then making the most of it for Ohio State en route to that national championship. Probably not someone I'm going to bet against anytime soon. So, okay, so that ends the more on-field kind of stuff. Now, we got to talk a little bit about the House settlement. We could do an hour and a half on this, or we can do 30 seconds. I am going to choose 30 seconds. The House settlement got approved. It just went into effect on Tuesday this week. And I think the big question from the Ohio State end is, okay, what kind of impact is that having on recruiting? The Buckeyes currently 5th nationally in recruiting. In most, I think it was the 247 composite rankings, 19 commitments. But, there's still plenty of drama about, they've lost guys that they thought they had. And, are people sort of working around the House settlement? And are the rules going to be enforced? And it has been a hot topic on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Reeves Columbus at BuckeyeHuddle.com over the last few weeks. I don't know, Tony, what is the neat, easy synopsis on the House settlement and what it all means moving forward? You can take 30, even 35 seconds if you need it.
First, I'll just say Donovan Jackson was drafted by Minnesota. I wanted to save you those comments. But Cody Simon and Denzel Burke were both drafted by the Cardinals. That's going to use up 20 seconds of my explanation on the House settlement. But as the time of, now that when we're recording this, money has gone from schools to players now. Revenue sharing has begun, and players can look in their accounts and be like, I'm pretty happy. And you have attorneys thinking, I could make you happier. You know what? I could make some of you happier if we just sue for something or other. We'll all be happy. And so revenue sharing has begun. I'm trying to find answers on this in terms of how many schools have just rolled their collectives into a composite body like Ohio State has done, or how many are still leaving them out there to go and operate. But those deals will then have to still all go through NIL Go, which is a clearinghouse that has to, the deals have to pass muster. Basically, they've got to be can't say market rate or market value because that's not something that they're going to use, but it has to be a value in the market, it has to be a rate somewhere in the market type of thing that will have to be agreed upon. And then the question that I still have, and I'm trying to get this answered, can you pay recruits? And if you have a collective, or if collectives are still things, then yes. But also any company that wants to can pay recruits to do NIL stuff for them. But how much is the NIL Go involved in that? And then these are all still questions that I'm probably not the only person trying to find some answers. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think there are people in on-campus offices trying to figure out the answers to some of those questions right now, because it seems like lots of people have opinions on how things are going or how things are going to go, and it's like, I don't know that I would feel super, super confident predicting anything in college sports more than about 72 hours out at this point. But however things go, we will be following all of it for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It has been, so far a pretty good year for Ohio State football, as you just heard. We're going to be looking forward to continuing that with the start of the 2025 football season. We're now less than 3 weeks away from being out in Las Vegas, covering Big Ten Media Days, then the start of fall camp. Really just like about a month away, almost exactly right now, a little less than a month away, actually, because the Buckeyes start the season early. And then, so, okay, there you go. 3 weeks till Big Ten Media Days, a little less than a month till the start of fall camp. A little less than 2 months till the start of the actual season. Things are kicking up into high gear at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and we would love to have you there joining us to talk about all of it. We've got our whole team covering the Buckeyes. We've got our whole team covering recruiting. We've got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there, all to make you a smarter football fan, along with a very active and lively board, the Huddle Board, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.